Right, well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. My name's Andrew Sleeth. I'm the International Marketing Manager at GL Education, and I'd like to welcome you to the webinar. Derek Devine will start his presentation shortly, but first I'd like to cover a couple of housekeeping items. During the presentation, we'll keep everyone on mute. This will help keep us to schedule, but at the end of the presentation, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. So if you do have any questions, make a note of them, and then just type a brief summary into the chat box and address those to the host. I can then relay those questions to Derek at the end, and he'll be delighted to help you out with those. If you have any technical questions during the webinar, you have a problem with sound or whatever, please again address that comment to the host, and my colleague Lizzie will work to assist you. After the webinar, you'll be redirected to a page on the website with more information about events we're running and the products that we sell. We are recording this webinar, and we'll get this out to you within about 48 hours so that you can share that with other colleagues in the school. Okay, so Derek Devine is one of the international consultants at GL Education. He's just returned from Argentina, where he ran workshops as part of the ESARP conference, and he's just about to get on a flight to Dubai and then India, where he'll be running in-depth sessions for schools teaching to the Indian curriculum who are just starting to get to grips with the cognitive abilities test. So he's had plenty of practice, so this should be a great presentation. Derek, can you take us away?
Great, thanks Andy. Hello, and welcome to everyone listening in live, and also if you're listening into this as a recording. As Andy said, I'm an international consultant with GL Education, and I've been working mainly with schools throughout Africa and South America, but I've also spent a lot of time working with schools in the Middle East, and I can see there's a number of schools here from Dubai listening in, so you're all very welcome. I know the schools in Dubai are getting ready to test with CAT4 as part of the KHDA requirements. So I hope this webinar covers off a lot of your initial questions in relation to CAT4. But as Andy said, we're going to have some time for questions and answers at the end. So if there's anything additional that you'd like to know that I haven't covered, please just let me know and I'll go through them with you. First, just to go through the aims of what I hope to cover over the next 30 minutes or so. I'm going to provide you with an overview of the CAT4 assessment itself. I'm also going to talk you through how to administer the assessment, so the different things you need to look out for in terms of setting up and administering the test. I'm going to talk through using CAT4 with EAL students, or identifying EAL students as you use the number of reports that are available to you through CAT4. And I'm going to provide an insight into the ways that different reports can be used. And as I've said already, we will have time at the end to go through any questions that you might have. So first of all, for anyone who's not familiar with GL Education, we've been around for over 30 years now. We're based in London, where it's actually quite miserable and raining at the moment, so I hope it's a bit better where you are. But we work with over 500 international schools in over 100 different countries around the world. At GL Education, we have what we like to call a whole pupil approach, and this falls into 4 key areas. So firstly, we like to look at pupils' potential, or measuring their ability, and that can be done through our CAT4 assessment, and that's what we're really going to go into and focus on today. Once you have an understanding of students' potential or ability levels, you can then start to look at their attainments, or how are they actually performing. And that can be done by using our baseline assessment for reception students, our progress tests in English, maths and science, and also our new group reading test. And when you know where students' ability is, what potentially they can achieve, and you also understand where they are now in terms of their attainment, what you can also do is look at any barriers to learning. And that can be done by using our PASS survey, so pupils' attitudes to self and school. And of course, all these assessments are tied in with the 4th key area, which is teacher judgment. But what we're really going to do is focus today on CAT4. Now, what is CAT4? Well, CAT4 is an assessment of reasoning that helps identify pupils' developed abilities and likely academic potential. It's a pure abilities test, so it does not rely on any prior knowledge, and really importantly, it's not linked to any curriculum. Another really important thing to note is that CAT4 is an assessment that students do not practice for in any way. So you do not practice or take any prior tests to lead up to taking the CAT4 assessment. Now, there's a number of different reasons why schools from around the world use CAT4. Firstly, it's to identify potential. So CAT4 can help you to identify who your possible gifted and talented students are. It can also be used to highlight students who may have low ability levels or may need additional support. And it can also highlight pupils who may find language to be a barrier to reaching their true potential or their full potential. They also use it in terms of personalized learning. So CAT4 can help you to understand the student's strengths, areas for growth, and also for developing learning preferences, or understanding what type of a learner you have in the classroom. It can improve communication. So there's a number of various reports available through CAT4, and we'll look at these in more detail as we go through the presentation. But these reports can really help improve communication between the school and parents, and also between the school and the students themselves. CAT4 will help you in terms of setting targets. So CAT4 will provide you with indicators for likely academic results for the IGCSE, for A-levels, for the IB, and these can really be helped or used in terms of setting targets on a yearly basis. It also supports the admissions process. So while CAT4 is not developed as an admissions tool, it can and is used by a number of different schools across the world as part of their admissions process, because it gives you a true understanding of the ability of any new pupils coming into the school. Another thing to note is that it doesn't rely on a pupil's understanding of English. So there's a lot of EAL, or English as an Additional Learner, students who sit down and take this test. It gives you a great understanding of what their natural ability levels are, but it doesn't solely rely on their understanding of the English language. And also, there's instant results available. So as soon as the tests are completed, within 2 to 3 minutes, you've got access to all the available reports. So all the group reports for teachers and individual reports that we'll go through in a few more minutes, everything is available to you within about 2 to 3 minutes. In terms of administering the tests, there's a couple of different things to go through. So it's a web-based platform. It does not require you to download any software. It can be taken on any laptop or desktop computer. It can't be administered on tablets at the moment, but that is something that we're currently looking at with our development team. It's available for a number of different age ranges and a number of different levels that are available. So the CAT4 assessments is from 6 years and 6 months old upwards. And there's a number of different levels depending on the age of your students. The test itself is made up of 3 45-minute batteries. So 3 separate parts to the test, each one lasting 45 minutes. I would always recommend that you wouldn't have students take all 3 batteries in one sitting. It really depends on the school itself, but a lot of you may decide to break up the test over maybe 1 or 2 days. You might have students take 2 batteries in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, or you might break it up over 2 days and have 2 in one day, 1 the next day. It's really completely up to you, but there's 3 separate 45-minute batteries that need to be completed for the whole test. Another thing that's really important is that all the students who are sitting down to take the assessments are provided with headphones, because there are some audio instructions provided at the start to bring them through some sample questions. So make sure any students who are sitting down to take the test have access to headphones. And we also provide all technical requirements to schools on a PDF sheet. So that will be emailed out to you as soon as you sign up to take the test. And it's just a couple of things to check off to make sure your system is set up and ready for the test. But as I said, it's a web-based platform, so it's all very straightforward in terms of setting up and administering. So what can you do with the results from CAT4? Well, the results from CAT4 can be used differently depending on your role within the school. So for learners within the school, it can be used to motivate, negotiate targets, provide ownership of learning. For classroom teachers, again, it can be used in terms of setting targets for the students, for building that learner profile, so understanding the types of learners that you have in the classroom, and also for providing valuable feedback. And we know from talking, from various talks you may have heard of Dylan White, John Hattie, providing valuable feedback is something that's really critical within a school. For middle managers, you can use the data to provide cohort or learner analysis, to measure value add, something that's really important to all international schools, and also for self-evaluation. And it will also help senior management and stakeholders review school performance, look at future curriculum planning, and also it can be used in terms of raising the school profile. So getting into the test now itself, the CAT4 is made up of 4 main areas of reasoning. So verbal reasoning, thinking with words; quantitative reasoning, how you think with numbers; non-verbal reasoning, thinking with shapes; and then spatial reasoning, thinking with shapes and space. So it looks at those 4 main areas of reasoning. Quantitative reasoning really closely linked to maths, and spatial reasoning strongly linked to the STEM subjects, so in terms of science, technology, engineering, and maths. And what I want to do is just give you an example of the types of questions that you'll see within CAT4. If there's anyone here who actually hasn't gone through and taken a CAT4 test in the past or hasn't seen what it looks like, I'd highly recommend, if your school is starting to use CAT4, to get maybe 1 or 2 extra tests, or let us know that you need an extra test just to go through it yourself, because it's great to get an understanding of what the students will actually go through when they're sitting down and taking the CAT4 assessment. But I'll give you an example of each of the 4 areas. So what you're looking at on screen is an example of a non-verbal reasoning question. And I'll just give you a chance to read through it. But what you're looking for is similarities in terms of the example and then the answer. And here you can see there's 4 sided shades that are shades in the middle. And what you're looking for is the common link within the answer. So here, in terms of non-verbal reasoning, your answer is D. This is an example of a quantitative reasoning question. So there's 2 numbers linked exactly the same way, and you have to figure out how the numbers are linked and complete the 3rd pair. So you can see 2 to 3, 9 to 10, and then 6 to, and you're looking for the answer. And of course, in this case, it's 7. Going on to verbal reasoning. So these 3 words are similar in a certain way, and you have to decide how they're the same. So in this example, you've got green, blue, red, and you're looking for the answer. And of course, in this case, it's yellow. And the last one, just to show you, is space. So because the paper's been folded over, the whole would have gone through 2 layers. And then when it's actually unfolded, you need to look at how would it actually be outlined. And in this case, it's B. So obviously these are sample questions. There's a number of different levels of the test, and it obviously gets more difficult depending on the age of the students. But it just gives you a good understanding of the types of questions that are asked within the assessment. Now, there's 2 extremes of the 4 batteries, and the 2 real extremes of the 4 batteries are verbal and spatial. Non-verbal and quantitative are really the hybrid batteries within the 4. So verbal and quantitative are the 2 batteries which tend to be most affected by schooling to a greater degree than non-verbal and spatial. And I want to give you an example of a verbal thinker versus a spatial thinker. So if we use the example of putting together a model airplane, a verbal thinker is more likely to read through the instructions step by step in order to complete the task, whereas a more spatially biased thinker is likely to ignore the instructions and start to visually picture in their mind how they fit the parts together. And probably everybody who's sitting down and listening to this webinar has a good idea in terms of where you fit in with that. But we do have a lot of great information on recognizing spatial intelligence and various ways of improving spatial thinking. I'd be happy to send that out to you. If you let Andy know, just send him a message through the webinar, and I can email you out a lot of information about spatial thinking, recognizing it, and obviously various ways then of improving it as well. But this really just gives you an example of the types of different learners that you may have in the classroom and things that you have to take into consideration when you're running lessons in the classroom. Now, before we go in and have a look at the CAT4 reports themselves, there's some key terms that you'll see throughout the reports, and I just want to highlight a couple of them. The word battery that you'll see in the reports is used to describe the 4 areas of reasoning. Questions attempted is a really important area to look at, and I'll let you know how many students have completed the questions, how many questions they've completed within a set time frame. And that's really important to note when you're looking at the score. How many questions have the students actually completed? The raw score is as indicated. The standard age score is a key area to look at when you're going through the reports. And I'm going to spend a bit of time going through that in a minute. But the standard age score is something that you really need to look out for through all of our reports. And the other key terms to understand, things like confidence bands, national percentile ranks, stay-on scores, group ranks. I'm not going to go into those in great detail now, but as you can see on screen, there's a description of each of the main areas to look at in our reports. And this is available at the beginning of all the reports that we provide. So before you go in and start looking at the group report for teachers or the individual reports, take a minute, read through this individual section that brings you through each of the key areas you need to look for, and it gives you a great description in terms of what they are, so you have a good understanding before you get started and going through the reports. Now, I mentioned the standard age score is the most important metric to look at through all of our reports. So for anyone who hasn't used standard age scores before, it's a way of comparing students of the same age. The lowest possible score you can get is 59, with the highest possible score being 141. If you have a student who scored 141, you're looking at someone who is in the top 0.05% of the sample. So this would be a really highly able student. 100 is what we call the 50th percentile, or an average score for a student of their age. And you can see that in the bell curve that's on the screen at the moment. For anyone who has a score of 85 or below, this would indicate that the pupil might possibly have special educational needs and may require further diagnostics. So we're going to go through the report now in a second and different areas to look out for, but it's really important to have an understanding of what a standard age score is and what the various scores actually mean within that. So take a second just to look through that, and we're going to go through the report in a bit of detail now. So we're going to go through a sample report that are available through CAT4. And the report that you have on screen at the moment is the group report for teachers. And this will most likely be the first report you look at after a cohort has completed the CAT4 tests. Now you can see that there's a standard age score displayed for each of the 4 batteries. So if you look along the top, you've got verbal, quantitative, non-verbal, and spatial listed across the top. On the left-hand side of the screen, you have a list of all your students. And you also have outlined the number of questions attempted. Oh, sorry, just flipped ahead there. So, like I was saying, you can also see the number of questions attempted in each battery. And now is probably a good time to give an example of why that's an important area to look at. If you see Nick Watt, Nick is the lowest red circle on the left-hand side. So hopefully you can see where I'm kind of hovering over his name there. So Nick has only attempted 24 of the 36 quantitative questions, 34 of the 48 non-verbal questions, and 26 of the 36 spatial reasoning questions. So if you can see where I'm highlighting there, it's the bottom red circle on the left side. And if you look at the scores that are linked to those numbers of questions answered, so in terms of quantitative, a score of 99. So 99 is not really a bad score, it's quite average for their age, but Nick has only answered 24 of the 36 questions. Similarly, when you go across and look at non-verbal, 102, so average for his age. But again, he's only answered 34 of 48 questions. And then in spatial, 26 of 36 questions with a score of 108. So it's really important not to just look at the scores, but also look at how many questions have been attempted. This might indicate that something has possibly gone wrong while Nick was taking the test. So you might go and speak to the teacher who overseen the test and just ask, did Nick experience any difficulties? Was there problems with his laptop? Did he have to leave the room at any time, which may have slowed him down from answering the questions? Or maybe it's just the case that Nick actually takes a lot longer in terms of processing answers. So if he had got more time to answer the questions, maybe he would have got a higher score. But it might indicate to you that maybe further diagnostics are required. So maybe there's some kind of processing issue there. But it just gets you to start asking questions in terms of what could possibly have happened with Nick. So really important to look out for the number of questions actually answered while you're looking at the scores. What CAT4 report will also do is help you to understand who your EAL students, so English as an additional language students, are, and if the fact that they are EAL students is masking the true ability. So EAL students tend to have a low verbal reasoning standard age score compared to a high non-verbal reasoning standard age score. And these students' minds are operating at a very high level, but they just don't have the language to keep up with it. And this can be the case in a lot of international schools where students are being taught in a language other than their mother tongue. And therefore, it can be hard for a teacher to truly be aware of a student's natural ability because the student may be having issues accessing the curriculum and communicating within the classroom simply because they don't understand or they don't have the language to keep up with what's being taught in the classroom. And a good example of that is Lara Stanford on the report. Now, if you can see Lara, she is the second circle on the left-hand side. If we just have a quick look across Lara's results. So Lara has a score of 97 in terms of verbal, which is average for her age. But if we go across and look at her non-verbal score, 121. So there's a big difference there between non-verbal score and her actual verbal ability. And we can also see that Lara has 126, a really high level in terms of spatial reasoning, and 111 in terms of quantitative. So what this is indicating to me is that Lara has got a really high ability level in terms of her natural ability, non-verbal, spatial, and quantitative, where their verbal score, so her verbal ability, is not up there with the rest of her ability. Now, Lara may be someone in the classroom who you may not find, or it may not be obvious within the classroom that Lara has a lot of ability simply because her verbal score or verbal ability is not as high as her natural ability, so a non-verbal ability or spatial or quantitative scores. So CAT4 can help to highlight these students who may be slipping through the gaps in terms of understanding what their true potential is, simply because their verbal scores or their verbal ability is masking what their true ability is. So really a lot of things to highlight throughout as we go through the report. Another thing is, if we look at Jenny Coyle, circled on the top left, this is an example of a pupil with a spatial bias. Spatial bias, what we just discussed a bit earlier on. So if we look across Jenny's scores, Jenny has a verbal score of 101. I'm sorry, Jenny is the top left-hand side, red circle. So if we go across Jenny's scores, verbal score of 101, quantitative score of 118, non-verbal score of 115, and a spatial score of 131. So Jenny would most likely be the type of pupil who would respond better to more visual teaching, things by using flowcharts, mind mapping, more conceptual work. You can see that Jenny has a real bias towards spatial reasoning, and it's really important for you to understand who these students are in the classroom, because it helps you to understand in terms of why particular students are picking up lessons a lot quicker than maybe than other students, and it could be down to the fact that they're a more spatially biased learner. And like we talked about earlier on in terms of the different ways of picking up things, some students will be quicker picking up through reading, textbooks and going through things, but a spatially biased person might be better in terms of flowcharts, more conceptual work, conceptual understanding. The other thing to highlight within the report is the final column on the far right-hand side of this. So don't just look at the mean score on the far right-hand side. Look at each individual score, because it could be covering up something else. And that's the group report for teachers. We're going to go through some other aspects of the group report for teachers, but this is the report that you'll probably spend a lot of your time going through at the start, And we've just gone through it briefly there, but you can spend hours going through and picking out each individual student to get a true understanding of where their ability lies and anything that could be holding them. Another part of the group report, and senior leaders within the school might look at this part of the report in a bit more detail, because it provides a real snapshot of the types of learners you have within a cohort. So it contains the percentage of the students on the left-hand side with a breakdown of the standard age scores along the bottom. And each of the batteries is highlighted in a different color. So if you take a second and just look at that. And you'll also see there's a pink line going across to help when putting together a school development plan for the upcoming year and for understanding the types of ability levels of the pupils that you'll be working with. So you can start to see the areas where you might need some development or where a year group might have a high level of ability and you may need to stretch or teach at a higher level. If you can see from this example that over 40% of the students have a higher than average quantitative score. So 40% of the students in this particular year group have a higher than average ability level in terms of their quantitative reasoning, very closely linked to maths. So you need to think about, what does this actually mean for this year group? What kind of plans do you need to put in place to cater for that? Are you teaching at a higher level? Do you understand that you have a high percentage of students within this particular classroom who actually have a really high ability level of maths? So the teachers understand that they may need to be teaching to a higher level to these students. There's also a high percentage of students with a below average verbal score. So these are pupils. Are these pupils actually going to be able to access the curriculum? Do we know who these students are? You may need to start to look at what literacy programs are in place. So you can see it gives you a great snapshot of the year group as a whole. And then you can start to think at where you might need development over the year, where the particular strengths are within the year group. And then you start to look at your development plan from the beginning of the year right through to the end. Still within the group report for teachers, all this is still within, the group report that you get to print out. So this is a scattergram that provides the teachers with another way of analysing the types of learners you have in the classroom. Each one of the dots represents a pupil. So blue is linked to boys, pink is linked to girls. And anyone within the white area doesn't have a learner bias, but the pupil spatial bias. So like Jenny, like we spoke about earlier on. So their spatial standard age score is very high, in around 130, but their verbal standard age score is at 100. You can see the verbal standard age score is listed on the left, the spatial standard age score is listed along the bottom. So you can start to map out which of your students within the classroom have a possible spatial bias, which students have a verbal bias. And before you go into the classroom, it gives you a great understanding of where their bias is, and that can help you in terms of preparing your lessons and giving you an understanding of why students might be picking up lessons quicker than others. Now, we also provide individual reports for teachers for every pupil who has completed the CAT4 test. And this will provide a breakdown of the individual standard age scores in each battery, along with the number of questions attempted and the group ranking, so you can see how, in this instance, Grace has performed against her peers. So it gives you a breakdown for each individual student. Within the report, it will also highlight where each student is placed on the scattergram that we just looked at earlier on. So it gives you an understanding of their types of bias, along with a complete breakdown of the implications for teaching and learning. And it also gives suggestions on how you might develop their reasoning skills. I'll just give you a second just to read through the types of communication that's available through this individual report. Now, also within the individual report for teachers, we provide indicators for possible IGCSE, A-levels, IB results, and also key stage indicators. And this is really a probability graph of achievement within each subject. So great in terms of setting targets on a yearly basis for each individual student. Apart from the individual report for teachers, we also provide individual reports for both parents and students. And this can be used to encourage and support more of a holistic home-school partnership approach to maximize student performance. The example on screen of a student's summary, very much designed for a student to understand more about the way they actually learn. So it gives the student a great understanding of the way they learn. It can also help in terms of communication between the teachers and the students themselves, because it can provide a sense of ownership for the students as they begin to understand why they may struggle or excel within certain areas. And the summary also provides information on ways that they can develop their reasoning skills. The parent report that we can see an example on screen now is more focused on how the parent can help their son or daughter at home with either their homework or just giving them an understanding of the way their son or daughter learns. And I would say in terms of sharing CAT reports or CAT data with parents, schools have very different reports in terms of how this information is shared. So some schools tend to send the report home in the mail, or they might email it to the parents. Others will have it with them for the parent-teacher meeting, so you can sit down together and go through it. And some schools don't actually share any of this information with parents at all. It really depends on your school. So there's no set rule in terms of what you should do with the data and sharing it with parents. But what I would say is that if you are sharing this information with parents, just really make sure that you're happy with understanding the scores and the results and what it means for the school. And also your teachers have a great understanding of it as well. Because you don't want to share this information with parents and when they come to you with questions that you're not able to answer. You want to have a great understanding of the information, the reports, and how you're using it within the school before you start to share it with parents. And as I said, lots of schools around the world are using it in different ways. Some are sending it straight out to the parents. Others are holding back, waiting till they understand. And that's the way that I'd really recommend. Understand the reports yourself. And then sit down with the parents, maybe on parent-teacher meeting evenings, go through the summaries that are available, give them a better understanding of the types of learner profile of their son or daughter. And it can really help them to understand why the school is doing certain things with the students, why there's possibly extra literacy programs in class, or the different interventions that you're running with each of the students, give them a greater understanding. And again, can help that communication between the school and the parents. We also have senior leader reports that provide a great breakdown of information from more of a cohort perspective. And a lot of these sample reports are available for you to look at on our website. So if there's anyone who hasn't seen any of these sample reports before, I'll give you the details of the website at the end. Please go onto the website. All of our sample reports are there for you to go through in detail. You can download them or just view them on the website itself. Now, just to give you a summary of the possible uses of CAT4, so what we've gone through over the last 20, 25 minutes or so. Firstly, CAT4 is used to identify students, groups, or students who may be underachieving and require additional support or stretching. So again, looking at who your gifted and talented students are, who the students may need additional support. It's also used to inform target setting in national tests or public examinations. Like I said, we provide indicators in terms of what they're likely to achieve when they go on to take their exams. So it can be used on a yearly basis or a termly basis in terms of setting targets with your individual students. And CAT4 really identifies pupils' cognitive strengths and weaknesses and gives you a great understanding of their learner profile. So what type of a learner are the students within your classroom? Where are the strengths, weaknesses, and different areas that also the reports give you that information in terms of how to develop students' reasoning skills. And also used to monitor intake ability against standardized data. So you can help you in terms of setting a baseline of where the students are now. And then you can look at what value has been added by the school over time. So like I said, a lot of the information that we have, so CAT4 looks at potential or ability, and that really works quite well in terms of our other assessments. So if you have an understanding of a student's strengths, weaknesses, ability, or potential, and once you know where they are, you can then start to look at what their attainment levels are. So not just through our tests, so you could have your own internal assessments that you look at, but you can start to match up where students should be against where they actually are now in terms of their attainment. So are they underachieving, overachieving? And then what you can also start to look at is possible barriers to learning. So what could potentially be holding this student back from reaching their potential? If they've got a high level of ability, but their attainment is not matching up with it, you can then start to look at, well, what could possibly be holding them back? And that can be our pupils' attitudes to school, self and school. So how do they feel about themselves? How do they feel about the school? We've lots and lots of information available on our website that goes through all of our other assessments. There's more information on CAT4 in terms of how schools are actually using it, I've given you a kind of brief overview of the assessments, or really an introduction into what CAT4 can cover. But there's lots more information available on our website that goes into it in a lot more detail. And I'd be more than happy to arrange any Skype, or we've international consultants that cover different areas around the world. We're more than happy to set up a Skype session and go through maybe things in a bit more detail with you. Anyone who hasn't used CAT4 before, I'd highly recommend maybe getting a couple of trial tests, going through it with one or two of your students, and then we can do a follow-up call and go through the results with you and actually tell you what that means for the students within your classroom. But please do go to our website, www.gl-education.com. Have a look through the sample reports, the additional webinars that we have with schools talking about how they've used CAT4 within their school. And get in touch with us, and like I said, we'd be happy to set up a Skype session with you. That covers the introduction to CAT4. What I'd like to do now is maybe open up the floor to anyone who might have some questions on what I haven't covered, or maybe you need some additional information on some of the areas I have covered. But I'm happy to answer any questions now if anyone has any.
Derek, that's great. Thank you very much. Just a reminder to those who are listening in, if you do have a question, then just type it into the Q&A box and address it to the host, and I can relay those on to Derek. Couple of quick questions so far. Derek, you mentioned right at the beginning that CAT4 wasn't a test or an assessment that you should practice for. But some schools do actually get parents who ask about this and ask for practice materials so that their children can get a good score, for want of a better phrase. How would you suggest they deal with that? Well,
what I would say is CAT4, like I mentioned earlier on, is a measure of someone's natural ability. So you shouldn't be practicing for it in any way, because it goes against the whole ideas of what the test is. The assessment is to help to give the school a better understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of a student. So from a school's point of view, it goes against why you're actually running the test, having the students practice for it beforehand. So it's a case of explaining that to parents, letting them know there's no actual right or wrong answers within the test. And the test is really to give the school a better understanding of how they can help the students, or how they can add value to the students' time within the school. So just explain to the parents, give them an understanding of what the assessment is. A lot of parents can be, like you said, they want their pupils to do well in the test. It's not a case of doing well or not doing well in the assessments. It gives the school an understanding of where the strengths and weaknesses are of each pupil, and then how the school can then look at ways to develop their student over time. So it's just a case of getting that message across to the parents.
Okay, thanks, Derek. Another one. You showed a report which had target grades for the IGCSE. So for schools that don't have target grades delivered by CAT4, what do? So first of all, could you let people know which curriculums we do offer target grades for? And then if there isn't something for their curriculum, what's the next step?
Okay, so we offer target grades for, like I said, the IGCSE, the IB, also for CBSE, the Indian curriculum. What that will do is give you an indication of what the student is likely to go on and achieve when they're taking their examinations. So what a lot of schools will do is actually look at that information and then build it into how the student is actually performing year on year. So schools will start to set their own targets internally for each of the students. And it gives them an idea of what progress is being made year on year, and giving them an area to reach for, strive for. So a lot of schools will work on that, and obviously depends on the age of the students and what level of test they're coming in at. There's different levels of the assessments, and depending on the level of tests, well, obviously the indicators will be different. But what a lot of schools will do, as I said, is really hone in on what potentially the student wants to achieve, and then focus on the individual subject areas and look at what kind of challenges they can set for those students.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it. You've obviously explained that very well. There weren't any more questions. So thank you, Derek. Thank you very much for everybody who joined us for this session. As Derek said, there's a lot more information on the website about these assessments and future webinars that we've got coming up. We have another one on Thursday with Brian Cookin of Nord Anglia International School, Hong Kong. So do keep an eye on the website for other webinars and other events, and we look forward to seeing you on one of our sessions in the very near future. Thank you very much.